With the recent campfire chat that Blizzard Entertainment pushed out for Season 5 of Diablo 4, they have brought highlight to the many new unique items and legendary aspects that they are bringing into the game. They also said that they want to raise up the current unique items because they feel like they are just not competing with legendaries. And that is very true. Because of how bad some of the unique items are in this game right now, and because unique items are pretty much the most fun that we have in this game. Like if you just think about the Druid Tempest Roar, or the Necromancer Howl from Below, the Starfall Coronet. These are such fun items, and they change how the game works on a fundamental level. And that's what we want to do. To make a game fun, you build rules around the game, and then you bend those rules, and then you break those rules. And that's what makes a game fun. And that's what unique items do in this game. So I decided in this new push for unique build-defining items in this game, this is going to be the new way that we think of uniques. Just build-defining and not generic uniques for every build. I'm looking at you, Tabaltswell. I decided to release my new series that is going to be the ultimate Unique Showdown. That's when I'm going to take all of the unique build-around items for the Sorcerer and pit them against each other in the pit. We are going to see who stands supreme and who falls to the wayside. I'm going to be optimizing these builds, releasing the builds for you all, and pushing these builds to the absolute limit that they can go. So I decided to start out with the build-around item that everyone knows is at the top when you take away the Immortal Flame Shield, and that is the Fractured Winterglass. This was the first build that I kind of built and really pushed the pit with. It's the build that I have the most experience with, and I definitely have the most runs on. So now to go over your skills, what you're going to have on your bar, you're going to have Teleport, Ice Armor, Flame Shield, very important Flame Shield, Unstable Currents, Frozen Orb, and Ice Blades. Now the enchantments that you're going to use are pretty locked in. You're going to want to use the Fire Bolt enchantment. The Fire Bolt enchantment is going to enable Burning, Synergy, and most notably Devouring Blaze. When Devouring Blaze was changed from needing Immobilize to activate versus being just crowd control to activate, it became usable in almost every build. Like, it was already usable in mostly every build, but now it's even more usable in every build. So it's a huge multiplier that that most builds do use, and this is no exception. And then, of course, the Frozen Orb enchantment is just going to double up on your casting. So you're going to be getting extra casts from the chance to cast on both of your one-handed weapons, and then you're going to get extra casts from the Frozen Orb enchantment. Just lots and lots of casting Frozen Orb. Now, one thing I want to talk about briefly is something that I learned about this build playing it a lot. This build is actually a little harder to use than other builds, namely because Frozen Orb, it's a little weird how it detonates. Sometimes it's hard to kill champions. You actually have to kind of teleport on top of the champions a lot of times to make sure your Frozen Orbs are hitting the champions. So just keep that in mind, like with how Frozen Orb detonates. It's not like it hits the whole screen like Fireball or Blizzard, so you're going to have to really aim Frozen Orb onto the champions to make sure you're killing them first. But one thing I want to note here about Ice Armor is that I was treating Ice Armor as a defensive cooldown. That is not how you're supposed to use Ice Armor in this build. Ice Armor is actually a damage cooldown. When you take the one upgrade, so let me show you real quick. When you take the one upgrade from Ice Armor, the Mystical Ice Armor, that when Ice Armor is active, you chill close enemies and deal 15% multiplicative increased damage to frozen enemies. That is the main portion of Ice Armor, and that is the main way we are going to be using Ice Armor. It's actually a damage cooldown of 15% multiplicative damage that you can activate to kill elite packs very, very quickly, and then kill the boss during stagger very, very quickly. So that's one kind of nuanced difference that I learned to use this build a little bit better over time, and definitely worthy to note. Now to go over your skills super quickly, 2 into Firebolt, standard, max out Frozen Orb, and we're actually going to go with, we are going to go with Destructive Frozen Orb and not Greater Frozen Orb because we need the mana. We're going to be casting a lot. Frozen Orb has a base mana cost of 40. That's a lot, so we're going to need that extra mana. Pretty much means that we have infinite mana during a boss stagger, so we can just stand still and just beam them down really hard. Also, 3 points into Elemental Dominance for a little bit of extra damage. We're going to max out just on ranks of Flame Shield just for the duration, because Flame Shield is broken. We know this. They're nerfing it. And then we are going to take Teleport to Shimmering because we need that extra DR. And again, we talked about why we're grabbing Mystical Flame Shield for the extra damage multiplier. Grab Glass Cannon and Elemental Attunement standard. We are getting Mana Shield here for the DR. This is very important. But we're only putting 1 point into Protection because we don't really need this. We just like the 1 point because it's good to clear like Poison and things like that with cooldowns. But to be honest with you, mostly everything is going to be CC'd permanently anyway, so we don't really need this. We are grabbing Summoned Ice Blades to help us reset cooldowns, like our ultimate skill, our Unstable Currents. And then we likewise are grabbing the Invoked Lightning Spear because we're going to have a lot of Lightning Spears. So this stun helps us stagger. It also helps stun packs that are ahead of us. I also mentioned that we are grabbing Devouring Blaze. We are going to get that full 30% most of the time because we are crowd controlling and we have the burning from the Firebolt. We are going with the trifecta here, Permafrost, Icy Touch, Hoarfrost. Pretty standard there for ice builds to maximize your damage. Unstable Currents here is mainly in this build because this 25% attack speed, again, attack speed is king. If you saw my previous video on why attack speed is king, check out that video. But namely, in this build, attack speed is king because every cast of Frozen Orb is going to allow you to summon another conjuration. So doubling down on your damage multipliers and everything. So attack speed is really, really good in this build. And specifically, the Unstable Current attack speed is in a separate bucket as to most other attack speed bonuses. Namely, Ancient Flame. We do use Ancient Flame in this build, so we're capping out our attack speed in attack speed bucket 1 via Ancient Flame and our normal affixes on gear, and then we are even further pushing the limits of attack speed by getting this Unstable Currents here. Very, very strong. So just to see Unstable Currents, you are going to get some casts from it, but really it's a 25% attack speed boost that it's most used for. And then we are grabbing Isu's Ferocity here. I'm not sure if this is still bugged and increasing damage. I will tell you that we have it in here for Ancient Flame for the 50% attack speed. And I will note that I did try out Avalanche, and the damage difference between the two is massive. Isu's Ferocity with Ancient Flame is just way, way better. I did try out Avalanche, but really there's no comparison here. If you want damage, Isu's Ferocity is the way to go. Now, for your Paragon boards, we're going to go over this briefly. We did manage to grab 7 boards, 7 glyphs, and 3 legendary nodes, so a good amount there. We're going to come up to our starter board and then just activate Flame Feeder. Flame Feeder is really easy to activate here because you have these 2 dex nodes that are right by, and you want to come through the elemental balance anyway to get that non-physical damage. So really easy to activate a Dex Glyph in the starter board. Really good there. And then likewise, we are going into our Enchantment Master board, grabbing this node here. This node, this Elementalist over here has become one of the most important nodes for Sorcerer because it gives you both non-physical damage and maximum life. Stacking maximum life is extremely important. Getting up, I think I'm at 24k life right now. And you really want to get above 20k as a standard, and try to push towards even 30k as high as you can. You could see I'm not grabbing this node here. This node would be good to grab for even more maximum life, but I couldn't fit it in. But then you're going to plug in your Elementalist Glyph, grab all of these nodes here so you can boost them up with the Elementalist Glyph. Really easy to get the intelligence here coming through. Intelligence, and all that intelligence there. Very easy to activate. Then going to your Burning Instinct board for Tactician for maximizing your damage reduction from burning and then giving you that 10% multiplier. Then likewise, you're going to go to the Elemental Summoner board. Now, the Elemental Summoner board is a little interesting. I love the Elemental Summoner board for the Enchanter glyph because there's so much intelligence here. You can get 60 intelligence. That's a huge amount of intelligence. And you can see that I got it all, and I want that non-physical damage. It's really, and the other reason why the enchantment, the Elemental Summoner board is so important is because this node right here. This node, the Swift Conjurer node, is pretty much the most important rare node on the Sorcerer boards of all right now because it gives you 10% attack speed. Yeah, 10% attack speed just by, these 4 points here. That's huge. That's pretty much a whole affix in attack speed. So really good to get this here to really cap out. Now you're going to want to adjust this based on your rolls because it's pretty easy. If you're using the Ancient Flame, you only need 50%. So always keep that in mind. You're only going to really need 2 good affix rolls on your gear. And you really want to adjust this depending on where you are to the cap. Always keep that in mind. Think about the cap. Ancient Flame's giving you 50%. This is giving you 10. You only need 40% from your gear. So keep that in mind. So I do like grabbing the Elemental Summoner Legendary node because it gives you a 10% multiplicative reduction on cooldown. That is really, really good. It helps you keep up Ice Blades a lot. So I really like grabbing this node. It's only 2 points since you're coming by here anyway. So I just saw no reason to not grab it. And then moving into your Frigid Fate board, of course, grabbing Frigid Fate capped out there and then plugging in your Exploit. I like grabbing Exploit because you can grab all this dex as you're moving out of the board, so it's really good to do there. And then likewise, classic, going for Ceaseless Conduit for your maximum critical strike damage for your destruction, classic board here, and then ending with Icefall with your Control Glyph, and grabbing the maximum amount of dexterity you can here, grabbing your Icefall, and then grabbing also this Cryomancy here, for only 2 points as you pass on. Now, one thing that you'll note in this build is that we do not run the Conjurer. I see a lot of builds running the Conjurer, and I tested this out between Conjurer and other things. For me, I only noticed maybe 1, maybe 2 conjurations that you keep uptime with this glyph in. It's really, really a minuscule difference, especially if you're not rocking a fully maxed out Greater Affix, fully critted Fractured Winterglass where you have 9 ranks of Conjuration Mastery. You really won't notice a difference. It really is only 1 conjuration, maybe 2. So you're talking about 6% multiplicative, maybe 12% multiplicative damage. And I just felt like Exploit was adding more damage overall. Control was adding more damage overall. Enchanter with the 120% non-phys damage was just, adding more overall. It's just, I felt like adding more multipliers and additive damage to all my damage versus just giving the duration on conjurations was better. So now to go over the gear briefly, obviously the best in slot is Shaco, DR, plus ranks to skills. It's the best. We know it. You could get away with a normal helm. A normal helm with like Ever Living on it would be good. You could get away with that. But the cooldown and then the extra damage from the plus ranks is always key here for the Harlequin Crest. The chest, you want to go with mana per second, I would say would be the most important. If you were going Glass Cannon, I don't think you can actually get permanent Flame Shield in this build unless you use a normal Pant and don't use Tibalt's Will. I like Tibalt's Will for the extra damage, so that's why I like to use it. Potentially, if you would go for the normal Pant and normal Helm, you could go for a permanent Flame Shield build. If you're not going permanent flame shield, you do need to cap out on your armor. So you will need that armor roll and plus total armor. That's the key to cap out your armor at the, you know, what is it, the 9,230. You can see here I'm at 9,5. So a little bit over, but that's because I have pretty good rolls on everything. So that's key there. I think mana per second on your chest is key. And then if you're not going for the permanent flame shield, then you need to make sure you're capping out on your armor. On your glove, my gloves are pretty good. You can see I triple critted the Frozen Orb Greater Affix for +8, so that's pretty good. I actually have a min roll on attack speed, so that's kind of bad. And then you would prefer this crit strike damage to be critical strike chance, because just the fact that you're critting is the most important part. So just critical strike chance would be better there. Tibalt's Will, pretty standard. And then Esu's Heirloom, also pretty standard. Now, one thing I want to note about Esu's, with this build specifically, you don't need to worry about your movement speed roll too much, because your movement speed is going to be pretty well capped from your Conjuration Mastery. You're going to have between 6 and 12 Conjurations in play at all times. With +6 Conjuration Mastery, that's what? That's an extra 36% or 72% movement speed that you're going to be getting from your Conjuration Mastery, pretty much capping you out, really, really close to capping you out. So I don't think that you really need to worry about the movement speed roll on Esu's too much. You can see I have a pretty low roll here, but I think it's fine because of the Conjuration Mastery really compensating you. For your weapon, you want to go Intelligence, Max Life, and then Vulnerable Damage. Or crit damage. I don't think it really matters. Then damage to close and chance to cast Frozen Orb on your tempers. You could see this is literally a best in slot weapon. This is like my holy grail weapon here. For your Fractured Winterglass, you want something I want to note is that you can get +4 here if you triple crit. If you have a +2 on Conjuration Mastery and you triple crit it on Masterworking, you can have a +4. You could see here mine's only at +3. You only want to crit it once if you're going for the +3, because the second crit is kind of wasted here. So you can see I kind of wasted it. But that's neither here nor there. But of course, the best thing to do would be to get a Greater Affix on the Fractured to get the +6 Conjuration Mastery is huge. Now, I actually like using Starless Skies, and I actually tested out a lot between using like a Conceited or a Shredding Blades normal ring with like double attack speed and like crit chance and things like that, or using Ring of Starless Skies. I actually found Ring of Starless Skies overperformed. You get that 50% multiplicative, plus it completely solves your mana issues. That is worthy to note there. However, if you don't have Starless Skies, you could definitely use a normal ring with like attack speed, critical strike chance, vulnerable damage or critical strike damage, and then tempering either cold damage or close damage, and then resource generation. But I do think Starless Skies is actually overall more damage. And then we have our normal ring here. Again, attack speed, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, damage to close, and resource generation. I think that's pretty standard. And we have our Storm Swell aspect here. Oh, and to note, obviously, we're using the Frozen Orbit. We're using concussive strikes on our chest, just for maximum damage. Damage. We go Sorks. Damage is low, so we got to go Glass Cannon always. It's pretty much the rule. It's pretty easy to do with Frozen Orb, though, because you're CCing everything. So you got Storm Swell there, and then on the, we have the Control on our dagger. I feel the Control is better for speed farming. You get more out of the speed farming. It's a higher multiplier. So when you're killing things super fast, it's just better for your speed farming. And then Ancient Flame for the attack speed. And again, we have Intelligence, Critical Strike Chance, Cooldown Reduction. I'd want that temper to be like damage to close or cold damage or something like that. But I was only able to get damage and then the chance to cast Frozen Orbs twice. So now that we've gone over the build for our Frozen Orb, Fractured Winterglass, pit farming, I'd like to talk about the actual Unique Showdown and how we're going to set things up and how we're actually going to quantify the builds and how we're going to rate them. So to start out here, we have this key, how you're going to read this spreadsheet. So anything that I'm bolding is a greater affix, because I'm actually going to put the specific gear configuration in this spreadsheet. So every time we do one of these ultimate showdowns, I'm going to link this spreadsheet in the video description. So you're going to be able to see that in the video description below. And then you can look at the specific gear configuration. You can look at it, the exact gear that I was using, the exact skills, and the exact Paragon board that I was using at the time that I recorded this data and rated this build for use. So if you're ever wondering, hey, you know, I use this build that my favorite streamer uses and I'm not getting the same results, well, you get to see the exact configuration and see all the differences when you watch these videos. So then I'm also going to be rating, because the other thing that I thought of is like, okay, there could be a disparity between the top level of gear that I can have for a build and then the current level of gear that I have. So I decided to rate each build's gear based on a rating system, so that way I could also quantify how good my gear was for that particular build. For example, if I had a Fractured Winter Glass with a greater affix on Conjuration Mastery, I could actually get +6 Conjuration Mastery on that build. I don't have that, but if you had that in the world, that would be you would way overperform what I would be doing now, and you could probably farm 10 pit tiers higher than I'm currently farming with my version of the build. But that's worthy to note, right? So, and that's why I decided to rate the gear. So 10 we're calling best in slot. We rated it 1 out of 10. 10 is best in slot. 9 is mostly perfect, and maybe you're missing a couple greater affixes. 8 is you just kind of have bad, like not really great rolls, but you have like perfect stats, like all the stats that you want, but you maybe don't have perfect rolls in those stats. 7 is you're missing a key stat, so like maybe one of the stats is less than ideal. 6 is you're having bad rolls and you're missing key stats. 5 is you're missing a couple key stats, and then 1 through 4, why are you even wearing this? Why? So I didn't even like, none of the gear will be a 4, hopefully. So then we're gonna go right into the data. So this is the data that I got for the Fractured Winter Glass. I'm not gonna actually post the raw data. I'm just gonna do a summary of it. So that's fine. You know, your mileage may vary. And that's the one thing that I like about doing this is that, you know, this is not necessarily to say that I'm going to be using the builds in the best way. But if the most important thing when you're doing studies is to keep as many variables as you can constant. So even if, like, let's say I'm not using the build as good as someone else could be, me being as the sole user of all these builds, meaning we're going to be consistent, we're going to get consistent results and be able to consistently compare all the uniques. So even if like I'm a B player, which I would I don't think I'm an S tier player. I would say that like I'm an A tier player. I'm okay. I'm okay. But being that we're keeping me as the user of these builds consistent throughout, we can consistently compare the builds because we're keeping me constant. So the results that I got for the Fractured Winter Glass was I was able to do tier 99s. The fastest time that I got was 2:05, like lightning, and then my average time was about 2:30. Now, the one thing that I will note, and I can say this because I've already started my fireball testing, and in fact, I'm done with my fireball testing. The thing that I will note here is the reason that the Fractured Winter Glass is going to stand above all of the other builds in the Sorcerer is because of the movement speed. When you talk about speed clearing and speed farming, that movement speed that you're getting from the Conjuration Mastery and the Conjuration Summons from the Fractured Winter Glass, it's S tier. It's next level. Running around at 100% movement speed at all times, it's just crazy strong. And I think that it's going to be hard for another build to like usurp the power of the Fractured Winter Glass just because of the movement speed. In fact, I found myself doing weird things with other builds to kind of compensate for the lack of movement speed, but we'll get into that more as we continue discussing which uniques are the best for this clear speed. So to then just go over how I rated my gear, I already went over my gear, but if you want to look in depth at the gear that I used, you can see here, like I said, full data sheet on my entire gear loadout and everything that I used. I gave my overall gear rating a 9 out of 10 because I had one perfect item, which is my dagger. My dagger is quite literally perfect. Almost 40% chance to cast extra orbs, 3 greater affixes, perfect stats, damage to close with the high roll. Like, it literally is perfect, best in slot. So I gave that a 10 there. I had, 2 8s and a 7. I gave a 7 to my armor because it's not great, to be honest. My armor wasn't great at the time. And then my Fractured Winter Glass, I gave an 8 because I did manage, and I posted an actual snippet of my Fractured Winter Glass so you can see it. I gave it an 8 because the aspect is pretty much perfect. However, I only had a +3 to the Conjuration Mastery. You can get a +4, but the only way to get a +4 on it without having a greater affix is to triple crit with Masterworking. So you can see here I have 2 crits, and I just didn't want to burn like 500 million gold and like 1,000 of the Masterworking mats to try to get this to 4. Like, if I was really, really min-maxy, really, really grindy, I would do that. Maybe I'd eventually do it, but I'm just kind of hoping that eventually I get a greater affix drop. If you do get a greater affix here and you triple crit it, you get a +6, which is huge. So just being how impactful that is, like getting the extra 3 ranks of Conjuration Mastery, I ranked it at an 8 because it's still, like, again, perfect aspect. Still got the +3, missing +3, so I gave it an 8 out of 10. Likewise, I gave an 8 out of 10 to my, I think that's ring. Yes, my ring, because I got a low roll on attack speed, and you'd really want the attack speed to be a greater. Likewise with crit, it wasn't the highest roll, and then again, you'd want it to be a greater. So yeah, that's how I ranked my gear. Still 9 out of 10, pretty good. Got a best in slot in there. Got pretty good gear overall. So pretty strong. I mean, it performed very well. Like I said, 2:05 was my fastest time, and then average of 2:30. Like, often I got 2:15, like 2:15, 2:20 runs. Not as fast as Bar, but like I said, if you manage to get a +6 Conjuration Mastery, you can definitely do like 110s, maybe even 115s with those 2-minute runs for sure. So I hope you enjoyed our first installment of the Ultimate Unique Showdown. I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this because unique items in this game are my favorite. They're my absolute favorite. I love the Starfall Coronet. I love the Staff of Lam Eason. I love the Overflowing Cuirass Amulet. I love all these items, and I just want to see them work in the game. And I'm hoping that Blizzard Entertainment sees this series and sees the ranking and sees the level of difference between the items in this game, because I just want things to be fun, and it doesn't have to be perfectly balanced, but I just want these items to kind of stand up to the endgame content, because that's when we're going to have a balanced game. That's when we're going to have the most flourishing and fun game, when everything is competitive in the endgame. So if you like this video, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe for the best gaming content and guides. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for weekly updates on Diablo 4.